Hey guys, I want to do a video today and look at different millennial teachings within the church and also look at the most popular ways that the book of Revelation is interpreted and talk about those four classifications and then compare what we're studying, these videos that I've been discussing, answering the question, are we in Satan's little season and has the millennial reign of Christ already occurred in our past? And look at this end times perspective and compare it to previous teachings within Christianity. And so let's just get started because I have a lot of questions that have come up over the past couple of months on my videos about these teachings in Christianity, previous eschatology viewpoints, and specifically different categories within how one interprets the book of Revelation and where we fit, we being people who are starting to look and consider this viewpoint on end times as having some merit, and look at it in comparison to those and try to tell you where I think we are most similar and where we are dissimilar within these different categories of eschatology. So let's get right to it. Hopefully this will be pretty quick. The four main teachings within the millennial reign of Christ, and these are all looking at the timing of the second coming and the millennial reign. This is how these four end times viewpoints are categorized. You have amillennialism, with the negates millennialism. And so you can see here from the time of the cross till the second coming of Jesus Christ that the millennial reign of Christ is viewed as being symbolic and that it is not a literal 1,000 years. Basically this entire period of time is, quote, the church age. And we are awaiting the second coming of Jesus Christ in the future. Within this church age, this symbolic time frame, within amillennialism, things are getting worse and worse is typically what most will agree with within this camp until the second coming of Jesus Christ, where the final judgment, the great white throne judgment and the resurrection of the last day occurs. The second viewpoint, post-millennialism, looks at, it's very similar to amillennialism in the sense that the millennial reign of Christ is viewed as symbolic. The difference is that this period of time between the cross and the second coming of Jesus Christ, there's a time period within here between the cross and the beginning of the symbolic millennial reign, known as the church age once again, but instead of things getting worse and worse, through the spreading of the gospel and everyone being converted to Christianity, things are getting better and better until there's a time period where all of the earth is converted to Christianity and there is 1,000 years symbolized by the peace on earth that occurs because of that, until the second coming of Jesus Christ. That is post-millennialism. Then you have pre-millennialism, and there's two camps in this. The first, post-tribulation pre-millennialism, and some will look at this as post-trib pre-wrath millennialism, where you have, after the death, burial, and resurrection, you have a time known as the church age, and the post-trib pre-wrath pre-millennialists within the church nowadays view us as still being within this time, this church age, looking forward to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Prior to that there will be a time of tribulation of the church before his second coming, and at the second coming, that is when the beginning of a literal 1,000 year millennial reign will occur until he comes back for the third time with heavenly Jerusalem at the time of the great white throne judgment and resurrection of the last day, when a new heavens and new earth are revealed. That is post-trib premillennialism, also known as post-trib pre-wrath. And there's different viewpoints within that. So you can subcategorize probably most all of these. Finally, we have pre-tribulation, dispensational premillennialism. Here, and this is taught a lot in the church today, pre-trib rapture churches, they will view us in this period of time, the church age, prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. That we're waiting the second coming of Jesus Christ and that it could occur at any time. At that time, there is a rapture of the church when Jesus comes in the clouds for his church. This is followed by a 7-year period of tribulation, a time of Jacob's trouble, a time of the Jews. And they will put a distinction between the church and Israel in their teachings. That's why it's also called dispensationalism. But after that 7-year period, after Jesus comes back for his church and the time of Jacob's trouble, then he comes back with his church at his third coming, and a literal 1,000-year millennial kingdom is established on earth. And at the end of that 1,000 years, after Satan's loosed and the Gog-Magog battle, then there is a final judgment, and you see the fourth coming of Jesus Christ in the clouds with heavenly Jerusalem. A new heavens, new earth are revealed, and there is a resurrection at the last day, the great white throne judgment, and the destruction and final judgment of death and sin. So you can see here that the pre-millennial viewpoints, which are popular viewpoints within the church today, especially in Western nations, especially in the United States, you see there are more than 2 comings of Jesus Christ. There's at least 3, and if you count his birth, and then the second coming at the time of the rapture for the church, the third coming with the church prior to the millennial reign, and then the fourth coming at the end that you see at the end of the book of Revelation, there are 4 in a pre-trib, premillennial, dispensational viewpoint. And I'm not picking on any of those viewpoints, because I agree there's more than 2 comings of Jesus Christ taught in prophecy. So this study that we're looking at, what is the viewpoint that is being considered here on this channel and by others, that we're in Satan's little season, where are some commonalities within previous end times teachings? Well, I think if we go to this one, and this is the post-trib premillennial viewpoint that we pointed out previously. This is also known as classical premillennialism. I think that this study of us being in Satan's little season and that the millennial kingdom being our past is most similar to this viewpoint. Here's the main difference. We're just further along this timeline. In this study, we look at the time of the tribulation occurring at the time of 70 AD. And that is the time of Jesus' second coming, after the Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem. The kingdom of Israel was judged, was desolate, became desolate, and the millennial reign of Christ, a literal 1,000 years, began at the time of Jesus' second coming, after the judgment of the destruction of Jerusalem and the Roman Empire. And we'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about preterism, futurism, and looking at the ways to interpret the book of Revelation. We'll talk about that time period of the destruction of Jerusalem and the fall of Rome and look at it in light of the study that we're doing. But basically, we're looking at us being in this period of time after the millennial reign of Christ, but before the final judgment. So as you see on all of these charts, there is no mention of Satan's little season in any of these millennial teachings. And I think this has done a big disservice to end time study within the church. If you go to 99.9999% of churches and if there's even any talk on end times at all, I guarantee you that Satan's little season is not going to be brought up in a normal Sunday teaching on end times events. It has been forgotten. It's never brought up. And I think that is doing a big disservice to the time that we may be in and seeing if we are on this, because there has not been any teaching on this. Again, you see all these charts and you just go online and pull up every chart, and it is hardly ever shown anything about Satan's little season, the time of deception prior to the Gog-Magog war, where the armies of the nations compass about the camp of the saints. Then fire is sent from heaven by God to judge those nations. And then a new heavens, new earth is revealed at the time of the descent of heavenly Jerusalem with the Lord and the Lamb within it. And that is the time of the resurrection at the last day. That is the time of the great white throne judgment within that period of time after Satan's little season is over. But you don't see that anywhere. And even in the chart that I just showed, trying to make a comparison about it, you don't see it. You just see the end of the millennium, you see a last judgment, and then eternity. But there's a lot right here that's been left out. There's a lot. God's word is powerful, and a lot of time can be summarized in just a few passages. You look at, the creation story, for instance. You look at the flood. You look at the first 6 chapters of the Bible, and there's over 1,000 years that have gone by within that time. So within a few passages at the end of the book of Revelation, a lot of details about the post-millennial time frame prior to Jesus' final coming, not second coming, but his final coming with New Jerusalem. There's a lot of information there that's been left out within the teachings on end times by the churches and within all these charts. So now let's go to another chart, and this is in relation on how the book of Revelation is interpreted and read. And there's 4 viewpoints here. One is preterism, or preterist view. And you can see here the cross, the return of Jesus, final judgment, where we are now, the time of writing of the book of Revelation, and you can see the period of time in red where most in these different camps would look at how they interpret the book of Revelation. Preterism shows that Revelation is about events in the past for the most part. And I say that because there's 2 camps within preterism. There is full preterism, where all of the book of Revelation has been fulfilled, and everything, including the judgment, the great white throne judgment, the last resurrection, new heavens, new earth being revealed, heavenly Jerusalem descending, is all in our past. That is full preterism, and I've vehemently disagree with that to the point where I do think that could be considered heresy, because they're denying the ultimate judgment of sin and death if you look at that and carry out that viewpoint to its logical conclusion. Us being here right now in this time, we see sin and death all the time. And if everything has been fulfilled, then obviously there has not been a final judgment on sin and death. Second, the resurrection of the last day, they said, has already occurred. Whereas we're here right now, and believers have that blessed hope of the resurrection in our future. So full preterism, I think, at the least, is a very, very, very bad interpretation of the book of Revelation, and probably borders, if not, is outright heresy. Then we have partial preterism. Partial preterism looks at much of the book of Revelation as being already fulfilled in our past, but that there are still things in our future that we have to look forward to. And out of these four viewpoints, I think that the viewpoint that we're looking at, with us being in Satan's little season right now and the millennial kingdom of Christ being our past, I think that partial preterism does correlate with the viewpoint in these videos that we're doing more than any other by far. I think there's some hints of futurism that we can discuss within the viewpoint that we're looking at of being in Satan's little season, but that the second coming of Jesus Christ, I think, has already occurred, just like he said he would, at the time after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. That there was a period of time where the Roman Empire, God allowed that heathen nation, the fourth beast, to judge Israel, his people. The destruction of Jerusalem occurred. The desolation of Israel, being God's kingdom, also occurred. And that after that time, Jesus came back like he said he would, and his wrath was placed upon the Roman Empire, the beast system, the fourth beast. And that is the time of the fall of Rome. If you look at this preterist chart here, it will tell you that most of Revelation was fulfilled by the fall of Jerusalem or by the fall of the Roman Empire. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, no prophecies are left to be fulfilled before the second coming. And that Christ's second coming happens somewhere in this time frame between the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the fall of the Roman Empire up to 400 AD or further, ultimately possibly even at 476 AD. And so there is a very vague hundreds of years time frame within this preterist viewpoint of when Jesus actually came and when all of the prophecies were fulfilled. Were they all fulfilled at the time of the fall of Jerusalem at 70 AD, or were they partially fulfilled there, and then ultimately the total fulfillment was at the fall of the Roman Empire up to 476 AD. So this is what differs from our study that we're looking at. This is the miry clay within the feet of Nebuchadnezzar's image that Daniel prophesied and told him the prophecies of. The head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the loins and thighs of brass, and the legs of iron and the feet of iron and miry clay. This is going through from Babylon to the Medes Persians to the Greek Empire led by Alexander the Great, finally to the Roman Empire. And at the end of the Roman Empire, it shows this mingling of the Roman Empire with the children of Israel, and ultimately God coming back and judging both. he judged his people after warning them over and over and over by himself and by his disciples and apostles within the letters that they wrote to the churches. But he also judged the heathen nation that destroyed Jerusalem and ultimately ended the temple system, the Levitical system. Now, the preterist view look at this as hundreds of years apart. And that's what they've been taught, because that's what our history books will tell you. But looking at this study, the stone that broke the feet of iron and miry clay broke those feet together, and that stone, Jesus Christ, became a large mountain, the millennial kingdom, and began to flourish throughout the earth. That was the beginning of the millennial kingdom. And that this period of time, I think here you look at the first 3.5 years and then the second 3.5 years, I think that's very accurate. I think that the fall of Jerusalem and the fall of Rome happened within a few years time frame, and that Jesus came back somewhere in between. After the destruction of Jerusalem, and to carry out the trumpet and vial judgments with his saints and angels on the beast system, the fourth beast, and the Antichrist who ruled at that time. That is when the Roman Empire fell. It didn't fall in 476 BC or AD. It fell, I believe, probably at 76 AD, just within a few years after the destruction of Jerusalem. But where full preterists get it wrong, not only in the hundreds and hundreds of years between these two events, but that at the time of Christ's second coming, that nothing in the book of Revelation still is yet to be fulfilled. And they say that everything's been fulfilled. Whereas our viewpoint in this study shows that, yes, his second coming came and these events happened at that time. And afterwards, there was a literal 1,000-year reign after the first resurrection at the time of his second coming, and the gathering of the saints, those which are alive and remain at that time. And they ruled and reigned for 1,000 literal years. But that after the 1,000 years, this study shows we're in Satan's little season, and that there is much at the end of the book of Revelation still to be fulfilled. Full preterism says everything's already been fulfilled. This study shows that there is a future war where Satan deceives the nations and they gather armies and encompass the camp of the saints about. And we'll talk about that, what that might look like, where that might be in a future study. But then afterwards, God, again, sends fire down from heaven, just like we read, to judge those nations that are encompassing the saints about. A great white throne judgment occurs at that time, followed by a new heavens, a new earth being revealed in order for heavenly Jerusalem and the Lord and Lamb within it to be able to descend. At that time, that is during that time frame, somewhere within that time frame, that is when we will see possibly a second type rapture event even. And so, like I said, there could be some futurist viewpoints within even the earlier parts of the book of Revelation from looking at this study. I'm not, it's not off the table that God works in cycles and patterns, and that just like there was a gathering of the saints at the time of his second coming when he came to judge the Roman Empire prior to a literal 1,000-year millennial kingdom on earth, that there couldn't be that same type of event before he sends fire down from heaven to judge the armies of the nations that compass the camp of the saints about. But then after that, there's New Jerusalem that descends, and during that time period, sin and death are judged, and there is a resurrection at the last day. That is when us believers in Christ that are here now during this time will receive a glorified body going into the new heavens, new earth in eternity with heavenly Jerusalem here on earth. And you can read all about that in Revelation 21 and 22. But that's what we have to look forward to. So, again, just to complete this study on the 4 ways to read Revelation, because we just covered partial preterism, which I think this study is most similar to, with some aspects of futurism within it. I think hardcore futurists are too far-sighted. Hardcore, full preterists are way too nearsighted when it comes to eschatology. Futurists, here we are now, look at the book of Revelation as minimal to nothing being fulfilled, and that it is all speaking about future events. That the tribulation, that the millennial kingdom, all of this is in the future. And that's what a lot of people view today, especially the pre-trib, pre-millennial view. Most of people that look at that end times viewpoints being correct are also futurists, where everything in the book of Revelation is in the future. Just to complete this, historicists look at the book of Revelation, and that it's describing key events of history stretching from the cross to his return, and that can be seen as a timetable which we can interpret the sign of the times. So in other words, world events today are even described in the book of Revelation. Things a few hundred years ago are described in the book of Revelation. Things 1,000 years ago within the quote church age are all described in the book of Revelation, where there may be an event in the book of Revelation where it discusses the first trumpet, that might have happened in the past, and a few hundred years later there was another event within the church age that kicked off the second trumpet judgment, and looks at those as a timetable. And then finally, you have the idealist interpretation, where Revelation isn't talking about specific times, but it's looking at patterns of events or trends that will be repeated throughout history. And that the book of Revelation is basically showing a pattern, and that it's a timeless message throughout the quote church age. Looking at the Tartarian studies, I think that a lot of Tartarian videos kind of fall ultimately into this camp where they're looking at these patterns and cycles. And I agree, God does work in patterns and cycles. But they look at these resets and these time periods where things build up to a period, then are reset, and then that they occur again. And that there's this kind of trends and patterns. And so I think that idealists, even though there is some truth to that, get caught up in looking at those trends and resets and patterns too much when it comes to the book of Revelation. The historicists, most historicists view the Roman Catholic Church as the beast system. And I think they get caught up in church history too much, about the time frame, what the early church wrote, and they look at that from a historicist standpoint, and then use that to interpret the book of Revelation. I think they can get lost up in that at times, even though there is some truth to the way a historicist can view the book of Revelation. See, there's bits and truth, and God's word is quick and powerful, sharper than a two-edged sword, and has multiple layers. And I think that's why people have so many viewpoints, and there's nothing to condemn, most of these viewpoints on the end times, because it is basically, things that we're looking forward to. I think, like I said, a full preterist viewpoint probably is something that we could say out of all of these is truly one that kind of borders, if not being right smack dab in the middle of heresy. But these viewpoints are all just trying to make sense of very hard prophecies that had many different layers for many different generations. And there are near fulfillments of prophecies as well as far fulfillments. And that's where I think that as we look at this study that we're in Satan's little season, that there's a lot to look forward to, and even things that we saw that we believe happened in the past of Jesus' second coming, the destruction of Jerusalem, the fall of Rome, that those judgments were mostly spoken about during the earlier and mid chapters of the book of Revelation. The harlot or whore that sits on the back of the beast, being Jerusalem and the Roman Empire, for instance, and shows how they were judged. The beast had the 10 kings that ultimately burned the whore with fire, being Jerusalem, the desolation of God's kingdom of Israel, that coming to a desolation, and ultimately the beast being destroyed, the Roman Empire, by God's judgment. So we see all of that as past, a preterist type view, if you will, meaning looking at the past, but that there's also details from those judgments, from the trumpets, from the vials, that we can get a sense of possibly some things to come in the future after Satan's little season. It doesn't tell us how long Satan's little season is. It doesn't tell us how long that it takes for the armies to get together to encompass the camp of the saints. That has not been revealed. The camp of the saints has not been revealed. It doesn't tell what our believers, what they're going to be doing at that time when these armies come to battle. The Gog-Magog war is what some people describe. It doesn't say what they're doing. It doesn't say, anything other than fire comes down from God, from heaven, to destroy the nations who rise up against the camp of the saints. Could believers be raptured or gathered together to a safe haven prior to that event where God sends down fire? I think he certainly can. I think that certainly could happen. So that could be a near far fulfillment of those types of prophecies. But I hope that this study, looking at the different ways to interpret the book of Revelation, which you see on the screen here, the different ways to look at where we are in the timeline of the second coming of Jesus Christ, and where the millennial kingdom is it in our past? Is it in our present? Is it symbolic? Is it literal? Hopefully, looking at these charts, discussing viewpoints within Christianity today and comparing it with this eschatology study that we've been looking at, that we're in Satan's little season, that the millennial reign of Christ is in our past. Hopefully, this answers some questions about that to better summarize it, and that'll be it. God bless.